Hello and welcome back to Garry's Garage, and in this episode we're going to continue making the new engine mounts so that we can reposition the radiators. If you were watching last time, firstly thank you very much, and if you weren't, we were busy making up some new engine mounts based on a design from the skid factory down in Australia to remount this Mitsubishi engine into my Anglia. And I left you because I needed to get hold of some longer bolts, which I now have, and I was also awaiting the ability to get down the country and pick up a lathe, and that will allow me to turn these down, get these edges that I've cut with the grinder nice and smooth and straight, and that should mean that they will sit into here much nicer once we finally add in the polybush. So let's get over to the lathe and get turning. Okay, so that's those bits of tube cut down to length and smoothed out on the lathe. And the next thing is I'm going to look at making up the plates that go onto the side of the engine. But before I do that, I'm going to need to get under there with a tap, because the holes on the side of the block where I want to bolt to are full of crud and paint, and I'm not going to get any bolts in there until I go at it with this. So I will be back in a bit when I have cleaned out all the threads. So that's those threads all nicely cleaned up with the M10 by 1.25 tap, and I couldn't get the normal handle in and get any decent spin on it. So what I did instead was a small ratchet with a 6mm hex screwdriver style bit and a 6mm socket. Sits perfectly on the end of there, and that gives me great ability to rotate it both ways with less hassle. So that's a good little tip if you're trying to tap into a space where you've not got the full diameter in order to do it, but you've got enough space to wriggle a ratchet. So that's that bit done. So what I can do now is carry on with some cardboard templating for the plates that are going to go onto the engine, try to figure out roughly where they're going to go, and figure out where those U brackets are going to go on the body. If I can, hopefully onto the original suspension crossmember. That's where the Escort that this crossmember came from originally would have bolted up to, so it's nice and stiff, marries it all up with the suspension. But there might be some things in the way, like starter motor, oil filter, various things like that. So I might have to come forward towards the front of the car a bit more and stick those directly on the chassis. So let me get under there with some cardboard and see what we can figure out. Okay, so I've got my basic templates. This one is for the passenger side and this one is for the driver's side. Nice and simple. So I just need to transpose those now onto this big sheet of metal, and then I will need to mark out the holes for mounting, and then we can look at getting the brackets installed onto the crossmember. Okay, so that is the two plates for the engine made. We have one nice simple one, which is going to be for the driver's side, and a slightly more complicated one for the passenger side. There's a casting on the side of the block that needs to go through this hole here, so that will sit around it quite nicely. So the next thing to do then is to offer these up back to the car and mark out the mounting holes. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use these small offcuts of bolt, which I've put a point on. So I will put these into the holes on the block where the bolts usually go, offer the plate up, give it a good smack with a hammer, and that should transfer 3 marks onto the back of the plate in just the right places where the bolt holes are going to go. I can then draw them out to size, and that should give me the mounting points in just the right place. I'm not sure how well this will show up on the camera, but there is a mark just there, one up there and one over there, and that looks about the right pattern. So I can get these drilled out now. Right on the holes. So let's have a look at what they look like up on the engine. So this is the passenger side. See, there's the hole there that we drilled to go around that casting, and the oil filter, and got the oil drain here for the turbo. It's just clearing as well. And I think this is about where I'm going to put the bracket on the crossmember. So there'll be a little bit of an angle on this tube coming across here, but that should allow this crossmember to drop down square and loosen the engine from its mounts. So I will now need to take this crossmember off and get these 2 brackets installed and make sure they're nicely in line, so that as it goes up and down it will come on and off smoothly and not bind up. Okay, so that's the bracket just tacked onto the crossmember at the moment. Don't want to weld it too much in case they do need to move, but that should be enough to be able to get it back in the car and start figuring out the rest of it. So I'm going to need to put the bushes into these and get these in place, and then start to figure out the size and cuts and angles for this. Now what I'm going to try is to use a bit of cardboard first. So this is almost the same diameter, just slightly larger, but it should allow me to more easily modify the cardboard so that I can get it roughly right before I start cutting out the steel. So let's get this back in there and do yet more CAD. Okay, so I've got the tube almost to the right size and shape, so I'll show you what it's looking like at the moment. So it's got a fish mouth on it to go onto the mount onto the body, and the angle there is pretty good to the mount on the plate on the engine. So that just needs a little bit shaved off just to bring that flat and square. But I think what I'm going to do is mark it up onto this tube here for the bush when I've got it in roughly the right place. And then I'll take this off, tack it on the bench, and then this can rotate round and I can then trim it bit by bit until that edge there sits nice and flush. Okay, so let's weld this first one in. Right, that's the first side tacked, and the other side is a lot easier. That can probably just be pretty much straight. So I've got an angle on this already, so I'll just smooth this off and then I can get the rough length and fish mouth the other end. Okay, so that's both sides now tacked up and fully in place. So we have driver's side and put some lights over, and passenger side. So what I'm going to do now is pull the crossmember off again, which should hopefully just slide straight down, and then I can remove those plates from the engine, fully weld it up once I've taken out the poly bushes, of course, so that I don't burn them in, and finish zapping on the bracket onto the crossmember, and then it should be nice and solid and it can go back in place.
Time after time, you're always right. Whoa. You never chase, yet hold me tight. Whoa. Give me up, don't you mind it. I will love you and I cannot find it. Time after time, I think you lie. Let's get closer tonight.
So that's these all welded up, and I've given them a quick lick of paint just to tidy them up. So I can now think about getting the bushes back installed into these and finally get them all onto the car.
Time after time, you're always right. Whoa. You never chase, yet hold me tight. Whoa. Give me up, don't you mind it. Never lost you and I cannot find it. Time after time, I think you lie. Let's get closer tonight.
So that was a bit more of a battle than I thought it would be. I was hoping getting that crossmember on would take about 20 minutes. It's been more like 2 hours. I had battles with the lower arms, trying to get the bolts through and all the spacers and everything. Ended up removing the steering rack again and putting that back. But it's all in, and the engine is now sitting on all the mounts. It's still sitting on the original roll stoppers that I had on either side. I can't quite get to the top bolts on those to loosen them to take them off. So next time the engine and gearbox comes out, I can whip those off, and then it will be sitting just on the 3 mounts, the gearbox one at the back and the 2 new ones at the front. So yet again, thank you to Alan Woody at the Skid Factory for showing what they do with their engine mounts and giving me the inspiration to do this. And next time I'm going to look at modifying the radiator to fit in the space that we've now made for it by getting rid of the old engine mount. So join me next time on Garry's Garage for that, and Merry Christmas. Goodbye.